This is the J.R. Hendrick Texan Gentleman podcast that deals with the early life of my alter ego, J.R. Hendrick. This episode is in a narrated format, commentary by myself and J.R. Relax and enjoy the adventure. Take care. God bless. Welcome to the podcast. It's myself and my alter ego, JR. We're getting out the ginger ale, metaphorically, so to speak. The Christmas season is over. Jimmy and I took a little short virtual vacation to Bethlehem. It's a lovely at Christmas time, isn't it, JR? That it is. Okay, so might as well go ahead and play the episode trailer for Dad-Son Bonding Part 2, which is January the 12th of 1996. Get ready. Mr. Clark, he took Kristen to dinner last night. I must have walked her home. He wasn't at the club this morning where he was having breakfast. I took her to breakfast at the student union. Your fiance went to dinner and breakfast with Kristen. What's up? I don't know, but I'll get to the bottom of this. JR is not, I repeat, not interested in Kristen. He's trying to build you up. He wants you to help him write his paper. When we are finished building up Mr. Clark, he'll have some good work for him. That's what I'm counting on. Okay, the main pieces of news from Dad-Son Bond, Part 2. The government shutdown in 96 ends. President Clinton gets ready to tour Europe to visit the military installments. Okay, so here we go. So January the 8th, at 6:30 a.m. at the ranch, Madison is packing up the boys to go on a trip to see some relatives of hers in Denison, Texas. Suddenly her cell phone rings, and it's JR. And she's like, what are you doing calling me the servant? And JR's like, well, I want to talk about somebody we both care about. That happens to be my brother Kyle. I know about his actions lately, that they've caused you pain. And, Madison's attitude is, well, why should you care? And he says, well, it just happens to be my last name, maybe Hendrick, but I'm a Swain gentleman, and I care about the ladies in my family. That includes you, especially since that my nephew is about to be born. And I want to warn you, just in case I may have to do something regarding a brother. And she says, do what you want. I really don't care. And so Jared's like, look, when it comes to the birth of a new nephew, I have to care. So Jared says his goodbyes and taking his thermos full of Dr. Pepper and walking out of the dorm. 6:30 in the morning, Jared. You take your thermos full of Dr. Pepper, which Carmen gave me. You're walking out the door. Where are you going? How about to grab a breakfast burrito? There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. It's kind of like whatever. Okay, so now it's 8 a.m. Pratt Neurology, Lubbock, Texas. Christine is going to see Dr. David Eccleston, a premier neurologist in West Texas. And the doctor has thick black hair, but he has like a bulgy, graying mustache. And he says, well, Christine's like, well, here's the situation, doc. I've had these migraines, headaches, and all of a sudden the nurse breaks and she says, well, doctor, I'm sorry, but you're doing surgery. And he says, well, I'm sorry, your appointment's going to have to be sometime tomorrow. Okay, so it's noon. It's Christine. Donna, the governess, is in the driver's seat because, well, Texas, you're 15 years old. You get a learner's permit. You have to have an adult passenger in the car. So, there's Christine and Jennifer. And she says, I see you got Christmas gifts. You're keeping up with the latest style. And Jennifer's like, well, you know, Mama, everything has to be kept with the latest style, but, well, like my older brother, I don't care about style. I just care about it if it works. And Jennifer's like, well, there's nothing wrong with being on the cover of Face of the magazine. And Christine's like, look, let's just go to the rustic for a bite. Quick bite. Okay, so it's 1 p.m. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Madison has finished packing everything up. When she sees a 6-pack of Strong beer cans, and she hung a sigh of anger. She's like, damn it, Kyle. She then loads up the kids and then drives away. 2 p.m. At midway prep, Christine is in biology class, and it's obvious that, the guys are looking at her in her flannel shirt and coat and her faded blue jeans. She was even getting a few whistles until, the biology teacher, Mr. Frankensberg, he gets upset. He's like, hey, y'all get your heads back in your work. You go to school to learn, but I'm for a fashion show. Reminds me of that song. Parents don't understand. Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince, 1980s. 1990s and 80s converse. Anyway, it's 4 p.m. Melissa Marie is meeting with her academic advisor to discuss something. And she asked if it's okay if she showed some of his work to his ex-fiance. And her fiance, he's like, no. And she's like, what's going on here? And she's like, he's a lawyer, he can help me with some of this. And he's like, no, that's enough. No, I gotta let you do that. And obviously, the teacher, he's being a turd here, okay? He's being a turd, and since he's being a turd, we have to teach a lesson. We have to give him the bell. Okay, you just don't go around being a turd like that and claim that you're a good academic advisor. The parent says, okay, fine, but the ones that I approve. So she gives him a nasty glare. Okay, so it's 5:30 p.m. Frank is having a date with a client who is in the middle of her intellectual property dispute. Miss Michelson, you remember her from earlier? And conversation is pleasant. And Frank's like, he whips out his card, like, oh, allow me. And she says, no, sweetie. I remember this place. Have an account here. You're going to allow me. He says, I'll pick you up the next day for tennis. And she's like, oh, you like tennis, huh? And he's like, yeah. And she said, let me give you some advice. She said, you may be my lawyer, but you need to give away more often. You need to start enjoying advice, a little good time. And he's like, well, you really have a tempting offer. It's like, ugh. So it's 6:30 p.m. JR is having dinner with CB and Connie. I'm betting it's like, a huge frosty mug of ginger ale. Oh. And JR's morning, he's like, oh, I don't know why my family just don't eat the ranch anymore. Kristen gets out with friends. Kyle eats at the bar. We're off, Madison's kids are gone most of the time. 8 o'clock, went traveling to interview my cousin. And Connie's like, well, how are you? Without Karen Craddock. And Jared's like, well, I'm all right. And C.B. Coleman says, well, I'll offer our toast to the next year. All right, picture this. There's this flaming fajita. It comes and it passes right there to Brent and Kristen's table. And Jared notices, And Kristen tells Brent, he says, I told you, I'm not ready, and he's not ready. And Brent says, don't tell me there's no old flame burning for JR. And CB said, JR, what's wrong? And he's like, waitress, fill up my Dr. Pepper. And please give me that beef and cheese queso coming. He's going to want a double helping, is what's going on. He's going to want a double helping because he's like, oh. All right. Now, it's January the 9th. It's 9 a.m. Jared's sitting in his dorm living room when his cell phone rings. It's University police officer Jeffy Moore. He said, Mr. Clark dropped off Miss Haig at her dorm last night after dinner. And Jared's like, please tell me he's gone. And he said, well, he picked her up and took her to brunch at the student union. They haven't come back yet. And Jared's like, what the hell? And he doesn't even tell me when he's back. Okay, so get this. It's at the student union. One of the main lounges. Brent and Kristen are talking. And Brent's like, I'm sorry. You have to finally go back. I just realized I have to go meet with an academic advisor. And Christine said, I'm not getting attracted to no slacker. And I'm not ready for JR. And neither is he ready for me. And Brent says, well, at least consider it. And she says, if you knew our history, you wouldn't ask him to date me. Okay, so it's 1 p.m. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Kyle comes back in from milking the cows. He goes upstairs and finds the clothes from Madison and the kids gone in the rooms, along with a note. So he gets mad, takes his clothes off the hanger, puts hangers and clothes all over the floor, and goes downstairs to sulk. Here, Mike Fields would tell me later on that afternoon exactly what happened. And I knew that by next week, I had to start doing something about my brother. 3 p.m. Dr. Eccleston recommends, he's recommending an angiographic MRI to be completed at the Ridgewood Outpatient Center. He tells Christine, well, you could be on antibiotics and other meds for 6 months, and Christine's like 6 months, and he's like, yeah. And I may ask you a few questions. Can you tell me what was involved that was stressing you out, when you were having the migraines fast? And she says, well, my brother went to hell last year. He dated this girl and wanted to marry her, and she said no. And I was angry at my father for uprooting most of the family so that we couldn't be there to be a support to him. And the doctor's like, well, what's the girl's name? And Christine says, well, Jennifer Bowers. And he parks up at Bowers. That name is very prominent in Texas and Arkansas. Wonder if Jennifer Bowers saw this doctor. I'll make sure it's doubtful. 3:30 p.m. JR is back in his dorm room after doing some research for his paper. when he gets a call from Jeffy Moore. Mrs. Clark took her to lunch, but now he's gone. She's up the door. Let her be, Jared said. What? I said let her be. I'll be going to ask my new secretary, who I just hired yesterday, named Darla, to get through Calvin Broderson, Willie Sutter, from the Albuquerque's Post-Dispatch. This man was the assistant internet editor for the newspaper. Okay, so it's the next day of the 10th. It's 10 a.m. Elizabeth Marie arrives at Frank's condo. And who should be there? Miss Michelson. And she's like, well, who's this? And Frank's like, look, I'm sorry. I gotta go. She and I got plans. And she's like, okay, fine, go. So she steps out and she overhears Frank and Mrs. Michelson talking about last night. She gets in the car, tells the driver to step on, and she starts crying. Okay. Sad. Now, at the same time, Kristen calls her father, who she is informed is headed to El Paso in business. Kristen is crying out of loneliness. Bless her heart. So, now, 11 a.m., JR, he goes to the Smith Hall Library when Jesse comes to talk. And Jess's like, we need to talk. Brent and Kristen. And Jesse's like, I know it's nothing new. Brent is seeing Kristen. And Gerald's like, put the words out of her mouth. And she says, I see. She was an ex-girlfriend of yours. I don't get it. 12 women throwing themselves at J.R. Hendrick on campus. And he wants Kristen Haig. Bless your heart. First Jennifer, then Karen. So I gotta stop this. So it's 2 p.m. and she goes and she's knocking at Brent's door. She's like, okay, Brent, out with it. Why are you seeing Kristen? Get feelings toward her. And he's like, no, I don't have feelings toward her. But I'm trying to get her to move towards JR. So he's not so lonely. And Jessica's like, look, you need to wake up. JR is not ready for Kristen. She's not ready for him. He just wants to build you up. All you gotta do is help him in this paper. And Brent said, well, with my machinations, he'll be knocking at their door. And Jesse's like, oh, don't count on it. 2:30 p.m., Elizabeth Marie gets, she's getting raked over the coals by her academic advisor again about the paper. And she's like, well, please don't get started with me, okay? I've been working with this all morning. Not to mention, I had a fight with my ex-fiancé, Frank, again. And he's like, oh, yeah, the academic advisor's like, the man is a damn fool. You'd be much better off without him. So lines up his pen as though he's going to give a bad grade. But then he drops the pen and he's like, well, you actually did excellent work, Marie. Idiotic. This dude's nuts. Okay. This professor has to get the bell. I've heard of idiotics, but good grief. Okay. 5 p.m. In her dorm room, Kristen asks Pulsey, her roommate, to take her to her Anastar meeting. However, Pulsey's pretty busy with some other plans of her own, so she's thinking she's having to get a cab. She's lonesome. January 11th, 3 a.m. At the ranch, Kyle wakes up in his room with a bed strewn with beer cans, and the phone rings, and it's Madison. She's like, hey, Kyle, how are you? And Kyle's like, surprised you even cared. And Madison said, listen, I know I was supposed to come back tomorrow from Denison, but I'll be back sometime Sunday, okay? And he says, whatever, do what you want to do. I just don't think you care anymore. Why should I care? And she says, you keep acting like that. This is why we need a break from each other. Ugh, Kyle. Kyle, idiot. Well, for him. For being an idiot. Good thing is, within a couple of other 2 or 3 episodes, will knock some of the attitude out of him. Okay. 11 a.m. JR arrives at the office of Dr. Bruce Kinghorn for a chat. And he says, I got some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is Dr. Harmon is not going to be overseeing your advocacy contention paper. The bad news is it's not going to be me either. You're being assigned a chief advisor, namely Friedrich McKay. And Jared's, he's like protesting, like, Friedrich McKay? But he's just a lecturer. He says, that's why I'm your tutor, and I'll give you some advice. Dr. Wild suggests you use interlibrary loan to find some of your sources and materials. I'm suggesting you just go ahead and contact your father's contacts in D.C. And he's like, all right, I'll go to the Smith Hall Library, and send out an email. And he says, don't expect a light walk in the park with Friedrich McKay. He can be very demanding, Dr. Kinghorn said. Okay, so 3 p.m. JR sits down the computer and he sends an email to Tim Reiner. Dear Mr. Reiner, source material needed. Send pamphlets and magazines and journals, conservative and liberal. Your prompt help would be appreciated. 7 p.m. Jim and his dream team have dinner for the last time at the mansion. It will close in March. At the same time in Lubbock. Brent's mother and sister take him out to dinner. And I don't know what it is. She's being a pain in the butt. The main thing is, he's like, this semester hasn't even started yet. And you're already working at that campus newspaper. And Brent's like, hey, look, don't start. I don't want no competition between who's more like daddy, me or you. And Margie, she's like, look, you keep that up. And that's why your father and I are separated. Now, at the same time, at Kentucky Bell, JR is having dinner with Willie Sutter. And he's like, JR, why JR? Calvin has told me a lot about you. What do you have in mind? And so JR is like telling him, laying on thick, look, I want you to give Brent an internet journalism job. We're going to take it 6 months to a year or so, and then he'll be sent off to a bigger deal. He said, you're trying to build him up to where he has a higher line of work. And Jared's like, oh, yeah, that's what I'm counting on. That's what I'm counting on. And Willie says, well, I'll see what I can do. All right. January 12th, 6 a.m. Central. As Jim's flight is 15 minutes outside of Dallas, he sits down in his captain's chair in the plane. He's writing notes inside his head about what he's got to do today. One of the things that he wants to do is around 9:30 tonight, he wants to call JR and check on him. 8 a.m., JR is at the office of endocrinologist Dr. Demetrius Nelson. He's been there for about 5 minutes and the doctor comes in. He's like, well, what's for the wear? He takes JR's nose, mouth, and eyes. He's like, yeah, you had a light sinus infection caused by adrenaline fatigue. This is partially my fault because of the dolphin testosterone experiment. I'm going to take you off the injections and put you on the regular testosterone patch. And Jerry's like, well, how do I use it? And he said, use instructions. You just apply it to your skin, once every night. Okay, so it's 9:30. And JR's at the office of he just gets at the office of Friedrich McKay, who's been pacing around for about 30 minutes, going nuts. And he says, JR now, JR. He's easing into his office chair. Took you long enough. to show up. The appointment was at 9:30. It was at 9 o'clock. I had doctor's office. Went late. Kara said, I'm going to let that pass. But don't you make a fool out of me again. Here's the guidelines for your advocacy contention paper. Dr. Harmon designed them. Of course, I made a few subtractions. Don't slack off on the nose. Remember, I'm keeping an eye on you. Yes, sir. Now, JR, your economic data would be interesting for someone who is running for Congress. He set up a makeshift office in Lubbock for the next few months because, well, your father said you need some help to compile the data. And make sure Reverend Isaiah Friedman gets a regular dose of it. 12 p.m. Eastern. Back in Washington, Jim reports to the Oval Office for lunch with the president. The lunch was cordial but distant, as both shot barbs at each other about the information that they know. 11:30 a.m. JR goes to Nap Hall and runs into Kristen. Darling, what do you say that we make a day of it? Go grab some lunch and the weather's nice and we might go sit at the fountain and talk as friends. And Kristen's like, oh, I don't know. I'd study. And he's like, come on. I remember taking you to a hot dog stand in Austin. Just you and me, as friends. I was seeing Olivia Reynolds. You were seeing Arnold. We can do this again. I want a burrito, and I just know you're hungry. And she's like, okay. Which I'm kind of glad that this happens. We're not going to do any spoiler alerts. No, we're not going to do any spoiler alerts. We're not. It's just a friendly date. Now, 12 p.m. Christine and David and Elizabeth Marie are frolicking in the pool. But then Elizabeth Marie gets a cramp. So she asks Christine to massage it. Christine agrees to, and she's like, I think it's all that stress from your paper. And Elizabeth Marie's, yeah, come on, being observant. And David mentions the scan that Elizabeth Marie has to go through. And Elizabeth Marie says, well, I'll be all right. Liar, fence on fire. And David, and of course David says, well, I want to be there when you can go to that scan. And Christine says, well, man, I have to think about that. Okay, next one over. Okay, so it's 1 p.m. JR and Kristen are sitting at the Texas State Fountain, and they're just sitting there, discussing things like with good old days of when they hung out in Austin. There was something almost magical in the air, and Kristen, I think, is a little uncomfortable. Jared's not. He's happy. But then 2 o'clock comes, and there's a nor'easter coming. And Jared's like, look, hey, well, I'll take you to the Holy Spirit Club. We can have dinner there. And we can hang out and have dinner there. She's like, look, my husband's acting up. Can you just take me home? She's like, okay, I'll take you home, and I'll see you around campus. So he takes her home. It's later on that night, and Jared and Kevin had just finished locking up the dorm room for the night, and the dorm phone rings, and of course, it's Jared's father. Boy, I hear that Friedrich K. is your advocacy paper advisor with some guidelines from Dr. Harmon. You be careful and don't listen too much to Dr. Harmon, what he has to say in that campaign paper. I don't trust him, Daddy, Gerald said. Tim Reiner sent you an email. And you focus on your studies this semester and not trying to chase some girl. Okay, with that, I give this episode 4.3 ginger ales and a call from Daddy. JR, 4.3 ginger ales and a call from Daddy. Hope you enjoy listening to the J.R. Hendrick Texan Gentleman. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, become a part of the adventure. This is the James Hendrick Empowerment Network saying until next time, get ready for the rest of the story. It gets a lot more interesting from here.